Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Kriti Tripathi, designer and marketing executive here at Seceon. Thank you for joining us for session 5 in our 2026 Cyber Battlefield series. This episode is titled Identity, Fragmentation, Security, and Cost Prices. Our speakers today are Shikha Pandey, who leads Principal Product Strategy Partnership here at Seceon, bringing a background in critical infrastructure from Meta and an MBA from MIT Sloan. And she's the one driving our global branding and the framework that help us grow. And with us is also Tom Ertel, SVP of Technical Sales here at Seceon, who has over 30 years of experience helping organizations protect their network from evolving cyber threats and supporting key customers globally. Before we begin, a quick note for everyone joining us today. Please feel free to submit your questions you want to ask during the session in the Q&A section, and we would be answering them towards the end of the session. With that, let's get started. Shikha, I will hand it over to you now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kriti. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, good to get started. You see it?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, nice. Hi, everyone. My name is Shikha Pandey. I lead product strategy and partnerships here at Seceon. Thank you for joining us from all across the globe. I know it's late in the evening for some of you, and we started in the morning for those in the East Coast, and very early morning if you're in the West Coast. So really grateful so many of you have joined us. Like Kriti mentioned a little about my background. I started my career in infrastructure at Meta, where I worked as a technical program manager supporting the backend systems that power Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. And my work there focused a lot on helping data and product infra and AI and infra engineering teams really scale through automation, tooling, Gen AI. And that experience really sort of helped me set up the background for what I'm doing here at Seceon. And it sort of taught me two things. Number one, that fragmented architecture breaks under real world sort of scale. And second, that unified platforms always sort of outperform platforms that are stitched together or tools that are sort of stitched together technically or even financially. Here at Seceon, I lead product strategy and partnerships and our global marketing team. My focus here is very much around how do we align the power of the platform with the real operational and economic needs of MSPs and MSSPs. And I spend a lot of my time working with partners, understanding where their margins are being squeezed, where their workflows are breaking, and where the shift to unified AI native architecture can give them a very good strategic advantage. Also completing my MBA at MIT Sloan, where I'm focused on innovation, entrepreneurship, and very much again focused on this whole idea of building scalable business models, especially at the intersection of AI. And that's why today's session is again very important to me. We're not talking about cyber attacks or scare tactics, and our point here isn't to even just mention buzzwords. We want to talk about how to really quantify risk and how to turn security into measurable business ROI and business outcomes, and how platform native operations are sort of transforming the economics of this entire industry, and why fragmentation is a very important topic right now. Okay, so let me get us started with the reality that every MSP and MSSP is facing here today. Security stacks are exploding every year. There are more tools, more alerts, more dashboards, more vendors, more integrations, and that complexity keeps rising, but margins keep sinking if you're an MSP, right? So let's start with the four forces squeezing every MSP and MSSP in the United States right now, including many of you possibly on this call. First, operational complexity. Multi-tenant security operations have become sort of a nightmare. Every client has a slightly different stack, different settings, different policies, and SOC analysts now have to jump between different environments all day. Nothing is standardized, and that makes scale almost impossible. Number two, economic pressures. We have everything from licensing unpredictability, per seat pricing, per endpoint pricing, per data volume pricing. Every year, the cost of sort of like simply maintaining a security offering goes up, and customers expect you to sort of keep the prices the same. So you're trying to do your best there, But then when it comes to detection and response gaps, even with 10, 20, sometimes even 30 tools that are feeding in your data, that visibility is very fragmented. So no single sort of like timeline of an attack, no sort of unified control. Detection is slower, and teams are really getting buried under this noise. And then compliance. This one is sort of like the silent killer every year. You got more frameworks, more evidence collection, more reporting, more manual work, more regulations, and every single MSP, like compliance alone eats like a full like 2, 3 weeks of your year per client. And we understand that. Like these are not random issues. These four pressures form one system that really traps MSPs into very high effort, low margin, and constant operational firefighting. Now, let's talk about what the MSP market actually looks like going into 2026 using real numbers from Service Leadership, MSP 360, IBM, Guards, Omdia, Arctic Wolf. So this information isn't coming from me. This is publicly available information coming from industry experts. So number one, like I mentioned, margins. The average MSP today is running at only 8% net margin, but best in class MSPs are trying to target 20 to 30%, and it's hard for people to get there. And the labor alone now makes up to 80% of this sort of total cost. So the economic model is stretched to a breaking point, essentially. MSPs now also are managing, on average, this number is crazy, 45 to 75 separate security tools across their customer base. This is a study that came from IBM's X-Force report, okay? And only 11%, 11, say those tools integrate cleanly. That's scary. That's a scary number. And that means nearly everyone here is paying in time, money, and manual effort just to keep their stack together. Number three, I'm looking at threat acceleration here. So IBM X-Force reports that sort of 28% of malware cases are ransomware, and Hiscox found organizations face an average of 66% increase in attacks per year. And we also had a report that we pulled information from Guards, which measured a 4,000 plus increase in AI-powered phishing since Gen AI has arrived. So the adversaries are basically scaling faster than our defenses that we're putting together, right? And then lastly, operational strain. Arctic Wolf found that 43% of MSPs now manage 500 plus clients, and 20% handle more than 500 tickets per month. So if you combine that with a 3 year average employee tenure, you can see now why teams are stretched very thin, why they're burning out. And when you put all of this together again, you're seeing that idea of what I talked about, shrinking margins, exploding tool stacks, rising threats, right? Higher operational load, and it becomes very obvious. The traditional MSP operating model is not as financially or operationally sustainable anymore. Now let's talk about the single biggest operational problem every MSP and MSSP is sort of facing right now, the fragmented security stack. This is what the day-to-day reality looks like for most teams. Like I said, like running 45 to 75 different tools across your customers, sometimes more. And we saw that in the last slide. Each one has its own, again, console, alerts, its own rules, its own updates, and of course, its own sort of contract and its own renewal cycle. And your analysts aren't doing security. They're also sort of like swivel chairing between dashboards and like piecing together alerts that don't really talk to each other. And because that data is fragmented, you end up with blind spots. You end up with duplicated work. You end up with inconsistent workflows. And you end up with massively slower, exponentially slower response times. And this is why even the most talented teams, the most talented SOC teams feel really underwater, right? The architecture is working against them, it's not working for them. And this slide isn't exaggerated. This is a lived reality in almost every MSP that we've worked with prior to Seceon. So why is this happening, right? Might say, okay, yes, this is a high level of fragmentation in a typical MSP stack, but why is this happening? And let me give you a bit of a background here. For the last decade, and if you've been in this industry for a while, you know that MSPs and MSSPs We're told that the best way to deliver great security was to pick the best tool in every single category. The best SIM, the best EDR, the best SOAR, the best vulnerability scanner. And that best of breed mindset made sense in theory, but in practice, here's sort of what it has created. Number one, high complexity. Every tool now adds a new layer of rules, alerts, tuning, training. Number two, high integration effort. So tools, again, like I said, they're not naturally even talking to each other. MSPs spend hours wiring them together and breaking them every time someone updates a simple API, right? And then number three, high cost. So when every single tool has separate licensing, separate billing cycles, separate professional services, and separate training requirements, I can't even imagine how insanely expensive that is. And then slow time to value. So now when you got these 10, 20, 30, 40 tools in your stack, it takes months, does it not, to really get a customer fully operational. You need to choose and have your customers know that, hey, you have an operational model that can actually scale. And you're not able to do that when you have 30, 40 different tools and they don't naturally work together. And then I want to hit on one more point here around sort of why this is happening. And that's the attackers. Attackers today don't break tools. They slip between tools. I feel like that's a very powerful statement, so I'm going to say it again. Attackers don't break tools, they slip between tools. And they're exploiting the gaps created when SIM, EDR, identity, cloud, and network data all live in separate systems. It's really important now in 2026 for you to realize that. And multi-stage attacks like ransomware, MFA fatigue, supply chain exploits, insider threats, right? They span 5 or 6 different domains, and no single best of breed tool can even see that full kill chain because they're not integrated, they're not even talking to each other, right? And when you also have a fragmented stack, every tool sees like a different piece of the attack, but nobody sees sort of that whole picture. And that delay is exactly what attackers can rely on. So living off the land attacks and credential misuse, things like this can look completely harmless when viewed by one tool at a time, right? But unified behavioral correlation exposes these things absolutely immediately. This is why a unified AI native platform consistently outperforms stitched together stacks because a unified platform has the ability to correlate identity, endpoint, network, cloud, behavior in real time, really closing the blind spots that attackers can really thrive on. Okay, now let's jump into another very uncomfortable truth that no vendor really wants MSPs to say out loud. But most so-called platforms in this industry are not platforms at all. They're Frankenstein stacks. So sort of a SIM bot in 2018, an EDR that was bought in 2020, a SOAR tool that was bought in 2021, a cloud add-on from last year. These are all sort of tools that are stitched together with duct tape and a lot of marketing. But the underlying systems never merge. So you still have multiple data stores, multiple correlation engines, multiple schemas, multiple update cycles, multiple consoles, right? And the vendor calls it a platform, but your analysts are still experiencing it as tool sprawl with a new logo on top. This is what I call the Frankenstein problem. And here's sort of the worst part, right? Like with each acquisition that they make, your integrations start breaking. So your automations break, your dashboards break, your PSA, your RRM workflows break. And that's not really modernization. That is fragmentation repackaged as a platform. That is a Frankenstein platform. And this right here is the setup for vendor lock-in. Because when you're wired into all these stitched together systems, leaving becomes very, very hard and almost, it feels like it's almost impossible. Okay, so now let's dive more into sort of vendor lock-in and how it happens and why it happens. I want to make this point very apparent in this entire conversation of best of breed. And I brought in this word of like Frankenstein and being stuck using the same tools and not being able to leave. And you might be watching this and you're like, wait a second, this is me, or I know of an MSP doing this. And you might be thinking, okay, I've like, why did this happen? How do I get out of it? And I want to help you feel better for a second because the system is designed to make you feel stuck. MSPs don't get locked in because they're careless. They get locked in because the system is designed to basically make leaving so impossible. And it starts with this lure, right? Like they get you with the free POCs and the discounts, and we'll handle onboarding. And it feels very low risk and the real cost is really hidden. And then when you finally get lured in those like first 30 to 60 days, your team learns their tool, your environment sort of gets turned into their architecture, and the dependency starts forming long before a contract is even signed. And then comes the integration phase. This is where the sunk cost really starts to build. You customize dashboards or reports and things for your client, right? And your analysts really get then certified into the vendor workflows. By now, you've like quietly invested 150K, maybe even 250K, 300K before year one has even started. And this is why they have you in that dependency. Your playbooks, your automation, your analyst skills, your client portals, right? All become tied into that vendor ecosystem, and their tool becomes the spine of your operations, whether it's good or not. Once you hit this point, even mediocre performance can start feeling normal, and alert fatigue becomes industry standard. Like, have you been to events and conferences before, and people are like, there's always going to be alert fatigue? No, it doesn't have to be like that. And the cost to leave goes up astronomically because this is what you know and this is what you've invested in, and it starts to feel like what we call the prison. Now, let me explain this concept a bit more. If you try to switch platforms, the cost hits fast and hard. Migrating even 20 to 30 clients requires 3,000 to 9,000 hours of analyst work, which alone can come up to 500K to even $1 million. And your analysts, like you all know, they need 3 to 6 months just to regain full productivity in a platform in general, and every sort of RM or SOAR playbook or API link or PSA or dashboard that the team has built, all of that has to be rebuilt. If you go to another platform, 300 to 600, sometimes engineering hours gone. And vendor certifications you paid for, yeah, they become immediate sunk cost. Sometimes 2,000, sometimes 3,000 per analyst, right? And even getting your own data back costs money, sometimes 20K plus in sort of extraction fees. They make it difficult. And for most MSPs, switching security platforms we've done the research, we know. It can lead to 12 to 25% churn risk because clients get anxious when tooling changes. So yes, let me tell you that I understand leaving is expensive. And this is exactly how vendors have designed it. But what if, after all of this, I tell you that the cost to stay or the annual bleed is actually even higher? And here's the part that vendors pray that you're not going to ever calculate on your own. Locked in platforms run at 30 to 40% false positive rates, which means your analysts lose what, 15 to 25 hours every single week just clearing noise. Real detection performance is 60 to 75%, so customers remain exposed sometimes even though you're paying premium pricing. And your team loses maybe 6 to 8 hours every week fighting manual correlation or vendor UI friction. And all the add-ons you assumed were included, yes, I know they inflate your licensing by like 40 to 60% per year. So in the end, this is the full cost of lock-in. Yes, I showed you it's very expensive to leave. It really is. But it's actually even more expensive to change. Even more expensive, I'm sorry, to stay and restrict and resist the change. And after everything we just walked through, right? The lure, the dependency, the prison, the annual bleed, the natural question MSPs ask is why now? Why is leaving suddenly possible in 2026 when it wasn't before? And this is where I think the story really changes. We're in a genuine industry inflection point, one that didn't exist 10 years ago. Number one, AI native platforms have come in. So for the first time, behavioral analytics, correlation, automated response are built into platforms from day one. That's our OTM platform. AI native platforms can eliminate 50 to 70% of manual correlation work that used to keep MSPs glued to multiple tools. Number two, true multi-tenancy is available now. Modern architecture offers cryptographic tenant isolation, per tenant customization, API first design. This means onboarding or migrations no longer require weeks of rebuilding dashboards and workflows from scratch. Secheon's S Collector can get months of migration done in 3 days. And number three, outcome-based pricing. Vendors are shifting away from outdated per endpoint models, and pricing is tied to actual security outcomes, not how many devices happen to exist in your customer base, right? And Secheon isn't priced on data um, ingestion. We know you need to be able to ingest your data to ensure you're safe. We're priced per asset. And then the last thing I really want to touch on here is the unified architecture. We're finally seeing platforms that replace 10, 20, even 40 different separate tools with one data model, one detection engine, and one workflow. And this is why switching is now possible. Not because MSPs suddenly have more time or money, but because we're at this point of time in the technology landscape where things have fundamentally changed. The architecture has caught up, the economics have shifted, the tooling has matured, and Seceon has arrived. And Seceon can really provide MSPs with this unified platform that they've been looking for. Oh, whoops. Let's go back here. Sorry about that. So, everything we've talked about so far, the fragmentation, the lock-in, the annual bleed, the switching cost, all stems from the same root problem. Security was built on separate tools, not as a unified operating model. And this is where Seceon is fundamentally different. Seceon is not a point solution. It's not an acquisition bundle. It's not stitched together tools. It's a unified security platform designed from day one to really replace the 10 to 40 tools that MSPs have been forced to manage from SIM, XDR, SOAR, Yuba, Threat Intel, NDR, identity analytics, cloud monitoring, compliance, you name it. An AI native behavioral analytics, correlation, and automated response platform. These specific functionalities are built into the core. They're not even sold as add-ons. And because it's true multi-tenancy, you get tenant isolation, tenant-specific customization, and fast onboarding without rebuilding everything for each client. So I'm going to say this again. All these different functionalities, the functions you're seeing on this table on the left, these are all included in one platform. They've been built in from scratch on the ground. These are not things that were just added in. And why is that important? Because, like, if you go back to the point I made before, attackers in 2026 aren't breaking into tools, they're slipping in between them. So, specifically, the point I'm trying to make here is that how do I know an attacker won't slip into my customer's environment if only one specific module is only in charge of one specific sort of aspect of visibility, right? Like if my modules are not all correlated in a comprehensive platform where each of these different functions are talking to each other very freely, openly, easily, I'm at risk. And now, if I think about this economically and solely economically, so if you again look back at this table, right, and you look at the red on the right-hand side, a traditional best of breed stack costs 180K for the SIM, 120K for the EDR and XDR, 90K for the SOAR, 30K for the threat intel, 45K for the vulnerability scanning, 35K again for the cloud security and the IT/OT infrastructure, um, uh, 40K for DLP, 25K it says here for things like Yuba. Um, this is an insane amount of money. So if you just take these 8 tools together, 565K per year in licensing, and that's before adding on more tools, PSVs and add-ons. Um, that's 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 uh, that's an insane amount of money. And Seceon consolidates all of those in one platform for 260K, around 260K per year. So take a look at total cost licensing only right here. You'll see that difference. That's half. That's half of what you would be paying. And then there's SOC team impact. Best of breed stacks sometimes require six, but I would say now in 2026, they're around like 10 FTE analysts just to handle the insane amounts of alert volume. Seceon, you need like two or three. Or AI-powered SOC cuts down resources in half because native correlation and automated response remove most of the manual triage. That's a staffing sort of saving of like, I would say like 200K plus per year, right? And put it together. Best of breed TOC, I'm sorry, TCO, around 1 million plus per year. Seceon's TCO, total cost of ownership, right? Less than 500K. That's again the point I'm trying to make to you, a 50% reduction in total cost while delivering faster detection, faster response, and dramatically less operational drag. And this is why unified architecture always wins, not just technically, but also economically. And now you might ask, well, how do I prove that, my security is actually working? What you're seeing here are real quantifiable KPIs that the Seceon OTM platform tracks out of the box. So on the left, we start with detection and response, right? Things like mean time to detect, mean time to respond, dwell time, true positive rate. These directly show sort of how fast and how accurately your SOC is operating. And you can measure each of these metrics to real business outcomes. Okay, so I'm looking at the left, the metric, the outcome in the middle, and map that to the Seceon capability on the right here. So now if I look here at the top right, risk reduction, this is where you see posture improving over time, risk score trends trending down, critical vulnerabilities getting resolved, broader attack surface coverage, and measurable improvements in phishing exposure. These are all things that we need to be testing. These are metrics and business outcomes you need to show to your board. And you can do that. You can track the metric to the Seceon capability. Now, again, bottom left, we talked about compliance and governance. So instead of point-in-time audits, you get a continuous view. For example, with Seceon Security Score 360, you get a continuous view of compliance, policy, violations, third-party risk, audit readiness. It can come out with a report for you on the spot, and it's mapped directly to controls. And finally, now on the bottom right here, if I'm looking at the finance impact, right? I'm looking at things like cost per incident prevented, value of threats, SOC automation savings, insurance benefits. These are all things that are included in our BI 360, our risk mapping with Security Score 360. And the key takeaway I really want to make here is that Seceon turns security from sort of a cost center that it can definitely be when you're operating an MSP, into a very measurable, defensible business function with metrics that both technically, that sort of technical teams and executives can align on. And these are metrics, again, a SOC head or a technical head can go take to the CTO, to the CFO, to the CEO and show them what the business outcomes of the work they're doing, what their team is doing is looking like. These metrics can help you really help influence your board. Okay, now this is where everything comes together. What you're looking at here isn't theoretical ROI or marketing language. It's real, predictable payback timelines that we have seen across our partners. The first 2 to 3 months are your foundation, deployment, migration, the first set of customers moving onto the platform. By month six, a roughly sort of 60%, at roughly 60%, 70%. I would say like almost most of our for most of our partners, 100% migration. Most MSPs finally hit and break even. And then by month nine, with full migration, this becomes profit. And at the end of year one, partners can gain $300,000 to $800,000 in annualized savings and efficiency by moving on to Seceon's platform. And from there, the benefits compound with 60 to 75% lower operating costs, which we talked about, and a security operation that finally is able to scale without adding staff. This is the real takeaway here. Platforms like Seceon are not just replacements for legacy tools. they can be multipliers for your efficiency, for your scalability, and for your resilience. So at this point, I would say the real question isn't, can you afford to change? The real question is, how longer can you wait and how longer can you afford not to? And that's going to lead me to my last slide here before we jump into our demo with Tom. But every MSP that's on this call um, will eventually sort of be on a unified AI native platform. I know that, I can guarantee that. Maybe you're using Seceon today for comprehensive cybersecurity. Maybe you aren't. Maybe you aren't using Secion's platform to its full advantage. Maybe you're only on our XDR and you're not using our SIM, or maybe you're on our SIM and you're not using our XDR, so those things aren't correlating. But then I urge you to remember the importance of what we talked about today, the integrations, the ROI, the correlation, and operations. This isn't about replacing tools, it's about redefining your operating model so you can scale, really differentiate, and win. And the future of cybersecurity, I believe, really belongs to MSPs who choose transformation. I explained to you today that in the past, security tooling has evolved faster than security architecture. Tools were built to solve individual problems. They were not built to model attacker behavior end to end. And that makes sense, obviously, right? And attackers already operate as unified systems. But when defenders don't do that, correlation becomes very manual, response times get slower, and gaps appear. And unified platforms work because they can finally mirror how attacks actually unfold, not how vendors have historically packaged products. And with Seceon, you're able to really modernize early, you make the right bet, you're comprehensive. And again, in 2026, you don't want to ask yourself, can you afford to change? You have to. You have no choice but to change. And you want to ask yourself, how aggressively do I want to win? And how aggressively do I want to protect my clients? And that's where Seceon can come in to really help you. All right. Thank you. I'm going to have Tom come in now and walk you through the platform. He's going to sort of be bringing everything I just talked about to light and bringing it to action. So take it away, Tom. Thank you, everyone. And then we'll come back for our last few minutes to do some audience Q&A.
Thanks, Shikha. Are you guys seeing my screen? Starting with one slide here. Can you guys?
Yep, I see it.
Screen is
Looks good.
Okay, hold on. Let me get rid of my controls here. As always, they're in the way. Okay, so let me make this full screen here. Okay, so just a slide first. So one of the key words for me is always correlation, right? And Shikha said this 10 times. Think about, and this is just an example of a bunch of different tools that you're going to need in your security stack, right? All the data coming in from your SIM, from your UABA, from your EDR, from your NBAT, they're all in different languages. Okay. There's not a structure out there that says, okay, everybody put your data in this format and ship it off, right? So all the data coming in from all these different tools is different. Okay. So it has to be if you think about the model where you have the best of breed that Shikha has presented, you have to have a person who understands each one of those languages, right? So it can take the data from that particular tool and somehow then, okay, convert it into a language that they can then correlate across all those different tools, okay? Wouldn't it make more sense if all that data, was put into a common language for you, okay, by a platform such as ours, right? So something that takes all that data and now does the translation for you. No human has to be involved. So instead of those, if you have 15 tools, you have 15 analysts, or maybe you have, let's say a handful, but you have a bunch of analysts have to convert that data and then correlate it, okay? So let's take a look at the platform now to sort of talk more about that. Okay, so one thing that Shikha mentioned was multi-tenant. Okay, so if you think about each one of these little boxes here is a different customer. Now, the data collected from each customer is not the same. Some might have SentinelOne, some might have Secion's EDR, some might have CrowdStrike, some have SonicWall firewall, some might have Fortinet firewalls. Each one of these customers has different data. So not only do you have to correlate within a customer, but you have to correlate across, you have to be able to understand the data across all those different customers. Okay. So once again, best of breed versus versus a unified platform. With something like this, all of your customers' data is coming into one place, and you can get it all visible on a single screen. Okay, so this is a point that I always like to make. This is a real customer, okay? And this is the last 7 days of data that has been collected. You say 1.3 billion pieces of information. And if we zoom in here and just take a quick look, I know it's hard for you to read, but think about how you would, with humans, with all these different tools and all these the different data coming in with these different languages, how would you even keep track of, okay, what's relevant for a particular type of attack? What might be a threat, what might not be a threat? Okay, you can see here, you've got Azure data coming in, you've got OneDrive, you've got SharePoint data, EDR data, you've got Windows data. So all these different data sources coming in, again, have to be translated into a common language across your analysts, and then data has to be correlated together. I contend that's not really possible, right? You can't do it. You can't have enough humans. So, in this particular customer, that 1.38 billion pieces of information translated into, multi-millions of pieces of information that needed to be tracked. Okay, we called them threat indicators. If this was even just 1 million, think about in 7 days, you had 1 million pieces of information that you thought needed to be watched. Okay. Again, with the best of breed solution, people have to do that. People would have to somehow keep track of all of those and decide if and when it looked like a real attack. So again, by having this all in a unified platform, having the platform collect all that data, put it into a common language, then take and look for all those potential threat indicators. Okay, it can now raise alerts. This happens to be our alert screen, and you can see an important column for me here is, let me scroll up here, this origin column. Okay, this is where each one of these would be one of your best in breed tools, right? It might be an EDR, it might be a logs from a firewall or a router, it might be logs from a server. So in this platform, that's all being done for you. All that data is correlated into an alert for you versus having to have humans do it. When you go into a particular alert, now you can see, and here's just an example where well over 1,000 things were correlated together for you by the platform, right? You didn't have to have people looking across all those different tools. And this is, I like to think about it with this timeline because this didn't all happen in one day. Okay, this happened in this particular case, this is since early in January, data started to be detected that might have been part of an attack, and every day more data was detected, but not enough to raise an alert. Okay, so some days nothing was detected. So in a platform like this is all going on in the background in real time. In the best of breed model, some human had to remember that on 113, it saw, what did it see here? Like 5 evasions, okay? And then it had to remember that on 130, it saw some recons. It has to remember all that versus having a platform that will continue to track all that. And only when it's seen enough, then it decides and it raises an alert. So it remembers the past. When it's seen enough, it decides, okay, right here, it said, there was a new process and some suspicious processes. Those are what pushed it over the edge and now raised an alert and said to your MSP, to your team, hey, you have to take a look at this. Okay. So again, best of breed, all that had to be done by humans, the translation of the information, the correlation of the information, and the determination that you need to take action. Here, no human had to be involved until you got to the point where this alert right here was raised on 2/6. Now the data is all here presented for you. Every piece of information is right here. You can open up every single one of these. You can look at all the details. And another piece of the solution is now, what are you going to do about it? In a platform, we've built in remediation, so you can actually have the platform take action versus having to have people decide what to do. So again, all this continues to speak to, the advantage of having a unified platform versus best of breed. Another thing I just want to highlight is by having a unified platform, by having a common architecture, we can continue to add new functionality. We're not buying solutions and bolting them on and having to put another layer on top that makes it look like it's unified. We've added in the last 6 months, we've added a whole business interface where you can do custom dashboards, custom reports. Most platforms out there are IT centric, right? They're based on your routers, your firewalls, your servers. We've added a whole OT section, right, where we can now go out and deal with manufacturing, utilities, and so forth, and collect data from that format. We've added a whole compliance section. So by having this one platform and continuing to add new functionality into it, you basically, continue to expand the ability to deliver services to your customers without having to go out, buy a new license, go, add new people to be experts on that, and then figure out how to integrate that data into a seamless look and feel. That's sort of an overview. One last thing here, by also having this unified platform, we've also provided the ability to now start to use LLMs, your ChatGPT-like tools, and create a clearer picture of an alert. Instead of having to look at data like in this format, you can actually come in here and create a very human readable version of any alert, okay, and get all the details, get recommendations. So again, having it all in one place, in one language, gives you, the best possible chance of detecting it early, and then stopping it long before the attack actually has taken any negative action, exfiltration or encryption. That's my piece, Shikha. Back to you.
Okay, awesome. I think we can move forward with some
Yeah.
Q&A.
Yes. Thank you for the demo, Tom, and thank you for the presentation, Shikha. Let's get into the Q&A now. One question from the audience we have is, how does Seceon handle correlation across identity, endpoints, network, and cloud without creating massive false positives? In a true multi-tenant environment, how do you ensure tenant isolation without sacrificing centralized visibility and control? So
Okay,
basically two questions, but yeah.
maybe Tom, I can start it, then you can take it home. Um,
Sure.
so I think Seceon correlates at the very behavioral level, right? Not the alert level. And Tom sort of showed that in the demo. And so sort of instead of chaining alerts from different tools, the platform builds behavioral baselines per user, per asset, per tenant, per identity events, per telemetry, endpoint telemetry. And we're taking in things like network flows and cloud activity, and they're all being normalized into a single data model and evaluated together in real time. And that's why we reduce false positives by what Tom was showing you, 60 to 70 to even 80%. The system looks for sequences and deviations over time, not just isolated signals, which is exactly how modern attacks actually unfold. And I think Seceon also uses cryptographic sort of tenant isolation at the data and the processing layer, so not just things like UI separation. And each tenant has its own sort of logical, I would say, plane, policies, behavioral baselines, while the SOC still really operates from a single console. So given all of this together, I think that like analysts can pivot across tenants for things like pattern recognition, but that data won't ever have to like really mesh together. And this gives MSPs then this idea of what we talked about earlier, really centralized operations without compliance and security risk that really comes from shared data stores over this idea of soft multi-tenancy. But anything you want to add, Tom?
Yeah, a couple things. So in terms of I think of sort of visibility across, let's say, could customers see other customers' data? No. In that screen I showed you where there were multiple tenants, every single tenant they can only view their own. So when they go in, they log in, they're only going to see their particular data, nobody else's. So that's all built into the platform. Another important piece, though, was the false positives, right? So every customer has a different environment, has different activities going on. For example, PowerShell scripting. In a lot of environments, that's a threat indicator. That's a sign of a potential attack. But in some environments, that's actually a necessary action that the customer and the partner is actually taking to maybe set up an endpoint or something. So it's important to have a platform that has the ability to say, okay, and we call these trusted threat indicators, right? Things that in your environment are not malicious, but we might have thought were malicious. You have the ability to go in and state, okay, this activity, this PowerShell scripting in your environment is not malicious. So from now on, don't treat that as part of an alert, and so you'll cut way back on your false positives. So there's always some tuning that's involved to make sure that the activity in your environment is being treated malicious only when it is.
Okay,
That's it.
so thank you, Tom. We have two more questions. Other one is migrations are where MSPs get burned. How do we realistically move without disrupting clients or blowing up our SOC?
Do you want me to take that? I can take that. I think the
Yeah.
concern is valid, and it's exactly why most MSPs, like I said, get stuck. And the difference today is sort of architecture, right? With Seceon, migration is incremental, so not sort of rip and replace. You can use Seceon in parallel too and ingest existing telemetry and validate detections before decommissioning anything, right? In our collectors, in our sort of, I would say, the API first design also lets partners migrate tenants in days. Like I said, not months, it's not taking years, and you're not really rebuilding your workflows from scratch. So most partners start with their very noisiest or I think lowest margin customers first, and that's able to really prove value quickly, and then they're able to scale, and that's how they're able to really avoid disruption while still escaping lock-in. So you can do both steps at the same time is sort of my point there. Anything you want to add, Tom?
Yeah. Yes. I'm going to share my screen here quick. So Seceon has gone out of its way to do integrations with hundreds of different capabilities, platforms, applications. So depending on what the customer is currently using, a lot of that might be not have to be ripped and replaced. Let's say, for example, they're using an EDR, a CrowdStrike. Seceon has integrated with that all different ticketing systems, just about anything you can think of here. I'm just scrolling by on my screen here, so that a lot of your existing tools might be able to the data be ingested and used, okay, or can be phased out over time. You can use it for a while and then decide to replace it with something already inherent in the platform if you want to later. So it doesn't have to be rip and place. We've done our best to try to integrate with as many different tools, as many different applications and so forth as possible out there. So
Great. Okay, so we have one more question. That is,
And I think then we
are
can also take
MSPs?
sorry, one last thing. I was just going to say we can take this question and then we can take a few more that are coming in from this Q&A. Um, uh, I'm seeing two more. We can answer these real quickly, but let's go to the third one, and then we'll go to
Sure.
the two more in this that are coming through the chat.
Sure. Okay, so this one is, are MSPs actually running security operations or are they running integration and maintenance operation disguised as security?
Yeah, I think I think this is a bit of like a controversial question, but I think for most MSPs today, most effort goes into, like we talked about, keeping tools working together rather than really like stopping the threats. You're really overwhelmed, your teams are overwhelmed, and you're trying to do everything to sort of maintain the correlation that you can between all these different separate tools. And I think when analysts are spending their day really reconciling all of these alerts and managing the integrations and maintaining the dashboards, it's possible that sometimes security can become a byproduct. It can become an afterthought, and it's not the focus. And the shift to a unified platform is really about returning, in my eyes, the human effort to detection, response, and customer value instead of sort of like infrastructure babysitting at times. So I think there's a real potential for um, uh, uh, maintenance operations to be disguised as security, but that's something that I think people are aware of now and they want to fix.
Anything you want to add, Tom?
No, no, that was perfect.
Okay, okay, great. So we have another question. What can assure us that with Seceon we would not be falling into a prison? That's for you.
I think there's let me try to do my best to answer this very clearly. I think there's three concrete reasons why Seceon doesn't create lock-in. First, your data is never trapped, right? So Seceon uses open documented APIs and standard data formats. You can you're exporting your raw and enriched telemetry detections reports at any time. There's no proprietary data models designed to make your data unusable elsewhere. Number two, the platform reduces dependency. It's not creating it. So most lock-in, like we talked about, happens when every workflow, every playbook, every integration lives outside the core system. Seceon sort of like brings together detection and correlation and response into one engine. You're not wiring together dozens of very brittle dependencies that can make leaving very painful later, right? And then I think the third thing I want to talk about is again this migration risk. The migration risk is very engineered out upfront. So Seceon is designed for, like I said, parallel deployment, very fast sort of deployment. Our S collector sort of can do a migration in days versus months or years that it can sometimes take with other vendors. You can validate detections. You can run side by side if you're using different modules, and you can migrate incrementally tenant by tenant sometimes if that's what you want. And that means you're never forced into a big bang sort of like switch that traps you operationally. And I think even with Secheon's architecture, it stays very portable. So that data stays yours, the operating model stays flexible, and that's how you can make sure you're not even locked in. Even if you go with us, you're not locked in. Anything you want to add, Tom, that I missed?
Yeah, so just a slightly different perspective that in my mind, part of the prison is having to have a massive army to be able to keep track of all that data, all those different tools. In our case, our whole goal is to minimize the number of people you need to be able to monitor your customers. So you have less expense, less people, less time spent, doing all that monitoring. So that to me, that's where it's less of a prison, right? Of course, you get someone locked into whatever you use, but ideally, it costs you less. It takes a lot less time when you're using a platform like this.
Thank you. There's one last question that is, what is your response to customers' tech debt challenge?
Okay, I'll do
I
my
missed it.
tech debt. Tech debt.
Oh,
Okay, so
go ahead.
this is a great question. Thank you. I think our response to tech debt is to systemically remove it, not shift it around. So most customer tech debt comes from years of really like stacking tools and custom integrations and these one-off like workflows that were not designed to scale together. And sort of we can reduce the structural tech debt because we're able to replace these 10, 20, 40 different disconnected security tools with the unified platform that's built on one data model and one correlation engine. And that really helps eliminate, I would say, like the ongoing cost of maintaining these integrations that aren't talking to each other and the overlapping detections. And then I think we reduce your operational debt as well, because again, the detection, correlation, response are native and built into the platform. You don't need this like custom like glue code that is integrating all these different systems together. And the playbooks again are simpler, and you don't need to do any sort of like weird constant returning across the tools. And the day-to-day operations, when all of your tools are speaking to each other, they become predictable. And they also help, again, reduce the cost that you're spending as well on these Frankenstein tools and these tools that are, like we said, the best of breed. But they're charging you two, three times more than you ideally should be paying. And then I think we also reduce because of the way we're built and everything is built into one model, one comprehensive platform. Seceon is very also API first and very I would say modular. So as customers grow and change vendors or adopt new technologies, we're not forced into really like architecturing sort of like their security stack again. The platform really evolves without creating new sort of dependencies. And we are very, very much sort of like an integration focused company as well. Whatever you want and the integrations that you want built, we're very customer first. We want to listen and we want to sort of provide what you need. So our idea is to sort of like systemically remove this instance of tech debt before it even starts, if that makes sense. Anything you want to add, Tom?
No, no,
Okay,
it's great.
good, good.
Okay. Uh, Thank you for answering all the questions, Shikha and Tom. That brings us to the conclusion of today's session in our 2026 Cyber Battlefield series. We hope you will continue the conversation with us when the series continues in 2 weeks with session 6th, Automate Compliance, Eliminate Complexity, which will be on March 3rd, same time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. If you are signed up for this series, you should get notification, but please be sure to invite your friends, your colleagues to join the series. The more, the merrier. With that, thank you so much, all for joining us and have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in
Thank
2 weeks.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And as always, any questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out. We're here to support you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.